right, welcome to the Judiciary Committee on this Thursday morning, March 16th. Before we get started, I'll kind of give you an overview of how the day will hopefully go. We're going to take up page 27, and you're going to find that we're going to be mostly figuring out next steps because it's not going to happen before crossover. Then we're going to move to a committee bill, which is a marriage license fee bill, which I'll ask Nina if she can distribute that while we're talking about H27, which I'm hoping to pass out tomorrow morning. It's fairly straightforward. We'll have a discussion about it. We have some witnesses to talk about it. But then we're going to have, actually the agenda says 10, but it's actually 10:30 that we're going to move to H230. Attorney General Clark will provide some brief testimony, then we'll get into some committee discussion. Right now, Will is in the Commerce Committee talking about the Dram Shop Act, and I have it scheduled for committee discussion and vote after the floor this afternoon. So I don't think it's not going to be a long floor time, so we'll probably also have time to continue discussion on H230 and if we need any additional discussion on the marriage license fee. So tomorrow is scheduled for after the floor, the two votes on the marriage license fee and H230, and if necessary, H288, but hoping to get that one up today. So I'll give you a little background on H27, then we can chat a little bit about it. Yesterday, we received an email from Rachel Seelig and really raising some major concerns that they still have. And I think I'm hoping we can resolve those concerns, but we're not going to be able to resolve those concerns in an hour this morning or in the next 2 days. So what I really wanted to just hear a little bit about talk a little bit to Jessica and see what we can do as far as next steps. So I don't know if Jessica, if you want to just join us and if you, yes, Jill, go ahead.
Is that email on the website? I'm not sure I saw it.
I think it, yeah, I will get it. It's not right now.
I can post it right now.
You were copied on it, so okay, yeah. So it is posted. So you had some things you were going to tell us today, which were interesting, good things, but I don't think it's enough probably to move this over before crossover. So do you have any ideas of what else we might need to do over the next, after crossover to keep it moving? Because we definitely want to keep it moving.
Yeah, thank you. Jessica Barquist at the Vermont Network. And I just want to start by saying I really appreciate all the work that the committee has done on this bill this session. And I do believe there is a path for us to move this forward. And I, over the last week, have done a lot of outreach to other states that have similar laws and had drafted up a whole bunch of their experiences for you. So I will send that to Panina to add to your record so you have that all as well. And I think my plan is to reach out to both legal aid and the AG's office and start having some outside of committee conversations with them to hopefully get to a place where we can come back and relook at this.
Okay, so, and I know Angela's really been working on this as well, and if you can keep Angela looped in on that, that would be very helpful. So any other thoughts? There may not be a lot of thoughts to have at the moment. We might move right ahead to the marriage license bill, but Michelle, any input on where we are and?
Happy to talk about the language as you left it if you want a refresher, but I understand, some of the concerns of legal aid and happy to work with the folks who, over the next couple of weeks to see if they can come up with some compromise language.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So I think that's probably all we really need to talk about. Well, Karen, please.
Maybe I
Take
missed
some
it.
time since I'm not.
I know, I was like, I
Else
think
to
I can
watch.
ask a question because I feel like
It really bugs you when every second of your life isn't
Is it-
used up.
Well, no, that's not true, but okay.
I agree with Ken on that.
Ken and Tom are filling in
Ken just
too.
likes to loaf around, so.
Wait, I have a legitimate question.
Yeah, please.
And maybe I missed this because I wasn't paying attention, but I'm curious if you can summarize what the concerns were from legal aid?
I, probably rather than summarizing, the emails,
Is it available now?
it's now on the website, so.
Where is it under?
It's under public comments.
Uh-huh.
In the bill.
And it could be under today presumably as well.
I think it's 15, that's what she said.
Oh, that's what it was,
Yeah.
okay, that's fine. Essentially, there's a concern that it can be misused, I think, by abusers, if I'm kind of summarizing it. But there's a more robust explanation of their concerns.
In the letter.
email. But I
Okay.
think that's the main point. And we definitely want to make sure that that's not the case. And so if legal aid is coming and expressing its concern, we absolutely have to look at it, so.
Great.
All right, so.
I'd also just love to let the committee know that the executive director of Circle, the domestic violence program in Washington County, also submitted some comments about the bill.
Oh,
So we have that as
are
well.
those,
Along the same lines.
okay, great, so, all right, I appreciate it, and, if you could do me a favor and text Sarah and let her know that we're moving on to,
Yes, we'll do that right now.
marriage license.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, well, look at that, you don't have to, she's right there, that's perfect. So, Michelle, do you want to do a walkthrough of this bill for us? There's not a lot to it, but we always like to have a walkthrough to start us out on a bill.
So I'm going to share my screen.
1 second.
Nina, can you let me share my screen?
Yep, I just made you co-host.
Okay. Okay, can everybody see that all right?
Yes.
Yes.
So this would be a committee bill, and it is amending a provision within the tax title. So this is a municipal fee. So, you know that when someone goes to obtain a marriage license, they do that from the town clerk. There is currently a $60 civil marriage license fee that's paid by the applicant. Currently $10 of that fee is retained by the town clerk. $35 is deposited in the domestic and sexual violence special fund. And then $15 of that 60 goes to the state treasurer. And so what this amendment is doing is it is not changing the total amount of the fee, still stays at $60. But instead of that $15 going to the treasurer's office, it is going toward the to the domestic and sexual violence special fund. And I will just hop over just so you can see the language for, sorry, the special fund. There you go. So you'll see in Title 13, under the chapter for Center for Crime Victim Services, a domestic and sexual violence special fund is established. That's administered by the Center for Crime Victim Services. It consists of surcharges and penalties and fines that are imposed according to statute in another area of Title 13. And I think probably the witnesses can probably talk to you a little bit about how they use that fund. And my understanding, I don't have much background on this issue because it kind of came to us in a little bit of a wonky way from Ways and Means. But my understanding is that this is an option that was presented by a JFO report with regard to kind of diminishing funds within that special fund.
Joe?
That $15 by the treasurer, do we mean the general fund? Like that was going to the general fund? Is that what it means by the treasurer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that a problem? I don't know. Does anyone know? If like taking that $15 out of the general fund is a problem?
I guess things would go to appropriations.
Yeah, it figures the Ways and Means are appropriate. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with this, except I just don't know how it might affect the.
So I can give
the state.
Yeah, no, I can give you a little bit more background of why we even have this. So when we did the driver's license suspension bill, we understood that there would be some amount, some effect on the fines being paid, undefined effect, as far as fines going to this fund. But even before then, the way that we have been funding victim services and the network and such has been based on fines and has had a downward slope. So we've really had this underfunding that's been going on. It's been made up the last couple of years through ARPA funds, is my understanding, or justice reinvestment funds. But we need something more definitive going forward. So there was, and I'm sure that one of the witnesses will talk about it, because I know that on the website under Jennifer Pullman, who will be testifying, there is a joint fiscal report that discusses the issue of, let's see what it talks about.
The funds and fees related to.
Exactly. And there was a number of recommendations for how to keep filling this fund. And I think one of the recommendations, if I'm not mistaken, and again, we'll hear a little more from the witnesses, is the marriage, I believe. I'm looking right now and I can't seem to find it, but we'll ask the witnesses. So this is an idea of how to start properly funding the domestic and sexual violence special fund. So Tom,
Yeah, I think Ken
Ken
and
and
Barbara
Tom.
were ahead of me.
Ken, Tom, Barbara.
Keep it up. How much did you say was going to the town, the municipal town clerks or the municipalities?
$10, and that amount is not changed by this amendment. It's only the $15 that goes now to the general fund that would go to the domestic violence fund. So it doesn't affect the revenues of the town clerks.
Okay. Well, I guess I killed my next question, was if the town clerks were, or the municipalities were even asked about this, because it costs a lot more money than that to do all this work. Thanks.
Barbara was.
So just to remind people, the Center for Crime Victim Services funding model is something that our committee has looked at for several years. And in this year's appropriation letter, we put in that it would be great for them to get small one-time funding to look at a sustainable model, which the JFO report ended up being done several years ago when we asked for the same thing. But originally there was going to be like a summer study committee that was going to look at, or some committee, maybe not a summer study committee, that was going to look at how should this department, which is like a weird hybrid, as you'll recall, be funded. And it got changed somewhere and got sent off to JFO. So JFO's assignment was to find other fees to look at or other it was a very narrow scope. So it didn't really step back and say, what should the model be? And I know we're where we are right now, but it's just good to know that we know that fines and fees and probably federal funding is not the long-term sustainable solution.
Great.
I agree with that, because we've, one thing I was going to bring up is that we've consciously tried to get away from fees for funding. And this is going totally in the opposite direction. And so I have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with, programs being fully funded, and I realize something has to be done. But then it goes through my mind is the $10 for the town clerks isn't changing. So with less and less marriage licenses being issued, it's affected, the domestic and sexual violence special fund. And this tells me that the town clerks are being affected also. And I would love to see their piece of the pie increased also. I mean, I know that, and it really hasn't got anything to do with this, but with mail-in ballots, town clerks are inundated with work and, putting in extra work. I know my town clerk was working nights. There was a Monday holiday in there. She worked all day Monday and with no compensation for her or for the town for all that extra work. So I would love to see I would love to see the town clerks get a little more. We're increasing the amount going to domestic and sexual violence by $15. And again, the town clerk getting nothing. I would love to see maybe $5 of that 15 go to the town clerks. And I don't know if Michelle knows or if anybody knows, when's the last time town clerks got an increase? How long has that been $10? I'm going to guess 10, 15, 20 years maybe. I don't know.
So in 2016, the fees were, this is the last time the marriage license was dealt with. Let me just find where that was. And it was raised $15, but I don't know, let's see if they changed where the money went. No, the money did not change as far as, it was still $10 to the town clerk, so.
Yeah. So that kind of reinforces my thoughts even more that the town clerks need an increase. And I also have, I think, same thought process as Joe, which kind of scares me a little bit, Joe.
We're having a meeting of the minds here.
This is a fee bill. Yes. And I'm kind of wondering why we're looking at a fee bill. I'm not really looking for an answer for it.
Well, I can give an answer on that.
But I know we're going to look at it and we're going to do it. But it's kind of like that insurance bill. I was, had questions why we had it and not Commerce. And same question for this is why doesn't Ways and Means have it?
So this is a path to get it to Ways and Means.
Okay.
And somehow I asked the same question, why can't you just take it up and I don't know exactly why, but it was, you need to pass this out and give us to put it in front of us. So we're almost like a conduit to get this to them, but we're weighing in on saying, we want to increase, we want to use this as one of the ways to help with the domestic and sexual violence special fund. So just one other comment, I'll go to Joe, is that my concern on how we've been funding the courts and this with fines and fees is actually more focused on court fines and fees, because it's like we're funding these things through other people's wrongdoing. And this is a little bit different. It's a different kind of licensing fee. And so I treat it a little bit differently. I agree that generally we need to not be funding things with fines and fees, but particularly fines and fees related to criminal and traffic offenses and such. So
just one more thing. Again, I'm going to stress it that I really think we need to have more of a conversation on increasing the $10 for the town clerks. So because we do these unfunded mandates in a sense for them, especially around the mail-in ballot stuff. And
How does that relate to marriage?
It doesn't. How does sexual abuse relate to marriage? I mean,
You're right, I didn't know if it should be tagged onto something else.
So no, I think,
Right.
here would be, I don't know that we're in a position to change that one so much here. I think partly when this goes to Ways and Means, they will also be considering whether, and we could put it in here if we want, whether the fee should be increased because it hasn't been increased since 2016. And only then it was increased by $15. So the question is whether, we can certainly, like we did when we sent the DLS bill, we can say, send a memo. Understand this is not in our jurisdiction, but a number of committee members, including me, I agree with you on this. Actually, that fee should probably be increased as well, or that amount should be increased for municipalities. I don't know if it's best if we actually suggest that in here or if we suggest it in a memo because they're the ones that are going to play with the money.
I would like to see it in here and not a memo. That's just my.
I think that would be fine, but I think if we do that, I would suggest that we suggest increasing the overall fee as well, since it has been 7 years at math since it's been.
Yeah, go to 65 on the fee and give the 5 to the town clerk.
Yeah, we could do something like that. Joe and then Tom.
Yeah, I agree. 65 on the fee, 15 to the town clerk. I don't think we should reduce the amount of the special funds to give more to the town clerk. I think we should just give it 65 and up. And just one thing I want to note, which I think is just, sort of on the other part of this bill, is that it does reduce a burden to the town clerks in the sense that according to the language that's struck here, that they have to file a quarterly return upon forms furnished by the state treasurer specifying all fees received by him or her during the quarter, blah, blah, blah. And so this should make their lives easier at the end of the day, which I think is important. But I 100% agree, $65, 15 to the town clerk, 50 to the special fund, and I'd be happy to pass it.
I can't wait
Means
till
like
the
that.
town clerks come after you.
For giving them money?
Giving them money.
For making their lives easier by not having to file forms?
Municipal government, you know anything about municipal government?
Quite a bit. I'm chair of the Planning Commission, chair of the Development Review Board.
You don't know anything about it.
I would just
Get on the select board.
I'm looking to just find out for myself. Do we know how many of these are done in a year and what the trends are exactly?
Yeah, and I've.
Sarah's finger is wiggling up there. She may
Okay, all
have the
right,
answer
okay,
to
Sarah,
that.
that's good because I have reached out. Actually, somebody from JFO is going to be available in a few minutes as well. So we have somebody from JFO can weigh in on this. Karen had a question, and then we'll go to Sarah. And then we'll start the testimony.
But I'm just trying to get grounded because I feel like we're going all over with this. But if I can clarify, my understanding is why we're looking at this is because we want to make sure that the Domestic and Sexual Violence Special Fund is adequately funded because it supports judiciary work. So I feel like if we look at it through that lens, that is what can guide us. And so I feel like that starts it. And then I feel like I don't have a good sense of count. Maybe they do need the money, maybe they don't. So I'm guessing would GovOps take a look at it? I just feel like we don't have the expertise to be able to say that unless we're getting testimony from that. And so I feel like we could say, we think this works to make sure that the Domestic and Sexual Violence Special Fund is adequately funded. Other committees take it from there. So.
Ken and then Angela.
Hi, Sarah. Isn't there a check mark on most? I don't know. I know Northfield's got it for if you want to donate to or give to the domestic violence and sexual fund there. Every town meeting.
It really varies by municipality.
Yeah, I know Northfield. Does.
It's on our ballot.
And am I interrupting you?
No.
And going back, I know that the towns are already heavily burdened, and the money that it takes to run the towns and everything, all you're doing is just adding more and more to it. And if the state wants to raise fees or something like that, that's fine. But it is the town budgets are already heavily stretched. I'm not saying $5, whatever, but it's the way we're doing it. I mean, there's a piece of me, and I'm really not even trying to be funny here, But maybe we ought to start charging for divorces because that's probably more
Yeah.
around.
There's a lot of money.
Well, I know my divorce wasn't cheap.
So I have Coach and then Angela.
Oh, man. Just detail. I guess, Sarah, you do have the data as far as the number of marriages. That always struck me a little odd that, it's one of the most important things that we do in our lives is basically also being, charged for if you mess up, I mean, maybe it's a weird way of looking at it, but it just struck me odd, and it has always, so I just needed to say that, it's like, getting married is like really cool, and that's what the whole thing was about. And then hanging off to the right is this, if you mess up, we're gonna nail you. And not Sarah, in no way is that, demeaning the work, that, the network does. It's just, man, pull it out of somewhere else, let's kind of keep that piece separate. I'm just, usually I don't get that intentional about stuff. This one just struck me and has every time we kind of open this little file. So I just needed to say that.
Yep, no, please, yeah.
I wanted to appreciate Karen's contribution, and I know we haven't quite yet started our hearing testimony, but I'm already a little surprised at the direction of the conversation and how quickly the point of the Domestic and Sexual Violence Special Fund has been put to the side. We're not the committee of jurisdiction for town clerks. And so I just want to, I don't know, as you're saying, I don't know what the $10 is used for. I don't know if there's a need to increase it. It'd be great to learn that if we were to make that decision, but I really want to try to focus on the special fund.
Right, yeah. So, and we'll do that by going into testimony from Sarah right now, and I think Jennifer is available, and then we also have Dan Dickerson, who will be on or will be here at 9:45. So, Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. And I very much appreciate this conversation. And I'm sure you can all imagine that I've been just looking forward to being able to jump in. And I hope that I have some clarifying language and am able to answer some of the questions that have rightly been raised by the committee. So as Michelle shared with you, the Domestic and Sexual Violence Special Fund was established in 2008, and it is administered by the Vermont Center for Crime Victim Services. And this fund really serves as the primary revenue source for critically important services for victims, which improve public safety and our responses to domestic and sexual violence. So on your committee webpage, there is a copy of the Joint Fiscal Office's report. And if it's lengthy, but I'm gonna just kind of bring your attention to pages 8 and 9, which have recommendations for the health of those funds. And when I do that, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Domestic and Sexual Violence Fund in particular. Is funded by two revenue sources. The first is a $47 surcharge on criminal and civil judgments. And this is something that this committee has talked about quite a bit because there have been significantly declining revenues from that surcharge. It is also funded by some portion of the marriage license fee that you've been discussing today. So as Michelle noted, currently $35 goes to the Domestic and Sexual Violence Special Fund, $10 is retained by the town of issuance, and $15 goes to the general fund. And What I will say is that although the revenues in the surcharge have gone down, actually the marriage license revenues have been quite stable. So we're not actually issuing considerably fewer marriage licenses. So this is really an attempt to use the marriage license revenue stream to, in a sense, respond to what's happening with the criminal and civil surcharge revenue that's going down. So I want to tell you a little bit about the fund itself so that you have that context. So those two revenue sources, the surcharge and the marriage license fee, together generate about $900,000 annually. And that supports the provision of both statewide and local victim services. And I'm going to highlight for you a little bit about how that $900,000 is spent. It's spent very well, and the money goes a very long way. So almost half of the money is passed through directly to the local domestic and sexual violence organizations in your communities. And they use a funding formula to distribute that money. So that accounts for variables such as population, geographic area, and the services that are provided by those organizations. So they each receive a share of that through that formula. In addition to that, those funds that are passed through, about $90,000 per year is distributed to member organizations, and that goes as direct support to survivors. It's used for immediate expenses like housing when someone's fleeing, transportation, or other really basic needs. In addition to those components, the special fund also funds funding for the Deaf Vermonters Advocacy Services that provide services to victims who are deaf, deafblind, or hard of hearing. Funding for Safe Space at the Pride Center of Vermont, which is our only statewide anti-violence program that serves the LGBTQ community. Funding for the Vermont Council on Domestic Violence, and some funding for the network as well. So in 2022, JFO issued the report that you can find posted on your website on the status of all of the crime victim special funds and made recommendations for particular policy solutions. And so one of those recommendations was that the entirety of the $15 of the general fund share of the marriage license fee should instead go to the victim special funds. So this would result in only a $70,000 loss for the general fund. So $70,000 when you think about the entirety of the general fund, which would have truly a minuscule impact, negligible impact practically on the general fund, but it would be a really important step to preserve the health of the domestic and sexual violence special fund. So the bill that you are looking at today addresses, just one revenue source, the marriage license fee part of the revenue. It's part of a multi-pronged strategy utilizing those recommendations from the Joint Fiscal Office, and will really help us preserve kind of the core mission of the Domestic and Sexual Violence Special Fund. There was a question from the committee that I heard about the number of marriage licenses. The Department of Health does publish an annual statistical report. They've been a little busy, so I went on their website and I realized that usually those are updated annually, but the most recent one available on the Department of Health's website was from FY22, or excuse me, FY20. And in 2020, 3,772 marriages were performed in Vermont.
How many, Sarah?
It was 3,772.
Thank you.
Yep. So again, this is a $70,000 impact on the general fund, not overly impactful on the general fund itself, will be very helpful to help compensate for the declining revenues from civil and criminal surcharges that are also impacting the fund. So we're trying to kind of blend revenue sources here to support the health, the fiscal health of the fund. And I'm happy to answer any questions that committee members might have.
Yeah, and I think just your last statement, we'll go to some questions, is really the point of why we're doing this initially here to send it to Ways and Means is Ways and Means, we have an issue with properly funding this special fund. And we think this is one of the ways that we should do that. So in any event, Joe, I think you had a question. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you so much for that context. I took a brief look at the fiscal note, and as you said, option 2, which is this, raises $70,000 per year. But I was sort of wondering why option 2 was chosen over some of the other options. For example, option 5 regarding vehicle registrations would only be a $1 surcharge, but would lead to, or a $1 surcharge on registrations, but lead to $445,000 for the special fund, which, that seems appealing to me because I look at that and I say, well, $1 is a lot less than, 15 more dollars, or what is it, 10 more dollars that we're adding, potentially 15, talking about the town clerks, and would actually give more money. So I'm just sort of curious why that decision was made.
Yep. There have been, when this report was released, there were conversations in appropriations committees and in judiciary committees. And as a result of those conversations, options 1 and 2 were the things that were highlighted by legislators in appropriations and other places that they felt like were worth pursuing. And so we have been actively working on options 1 and 2. I think you're correct that, there are many options that are outlined in that report. And certainly, our intention is not to pursue all of them. We're not seeking to grow the fund. We just are simply seeking to really address the shortfalls in the fund. And so, the options that we're pursuing would simply just do that. And Jennifer can speak to this when she testifies, but as I noted, it's a $900,000 fund per year annually that goes to, over 20 organizations. And currently there is a $350,000 projected deficit in the fund. So we are looking to essentially address potential revenue changes that would help us meet that target number of $350,000.
That's great information. Yeah, I option 5 appeals to me more than option 2, I guess what I'm trying to say, because it would completely address the deficit at a smaller impact to people, I think. So thanks.
And also I'd just add that this is what actually Ways and Means came.
I see. Okay.
Saying, we need this conduit, we need this vehicle, and we're providing the vehicle. So
this is sort of a flyby type thing, but not
really.
And,
we're actually passing out a committee.
But
that's the way for some reason that I don't fully understand is the way that we can get this in front of Ways and Means and really express our concern for this particular fund. So, and they're gonna. The bottom line is they're going to play with the numbers. We're making a recommendation, but ultimately it is Ways and Means that decide those parts. But
I just want to clarify, Joe, you're saying that $1 on registrations would be less than $5 extra on increasing the marriage license, but nobody's suggested, other than some committee discussion there, we're not looking at something that raises a fee right now. We're looking at something that does not change fees for people who are doing things. It just shifts.
Do you understand that? I thought I read you were raising from 50 to 60, or did I just misread that? Oh, I just read it. Okay.
So we're just taking a $60 fee and we're shifting from money from the general fund to the domestic and sexual violence fund.
Still think that the $1 is better because I'd like to grow the fund.
Yeah, I don't disagree about growing the fund.
I appreciate the clarification. Yeah, I appreciate that.
So Karen.
Yes, to me, this seems pretty straightforward. Like, we just need to have this conversation because Ways and Means can't just initiate. We need to increase the special fund and address it. They're looking for us as the committee of jurisdiction to say, can you please have this conversation? Because we want to make sure the special fund is fully funded. So I'm happy to move this forward so we can raise our hand and say, please do the work to make sure this fund is fully funded. And I don't know if that would include like for me, I would say, please do what you can to make sure it is. First, if it is raising the fee, whatever it is, like, I think our message is saying we want this fund fully funded or adequately funded.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. And I do think, going back to Tom, that we should encourage them on the marriage license, using that for the municipalities as well. But I am a little concerned about going outside of our jurisdiction to do that, but we can absolutely.
I think we're already there.
I don't believe so, since they specifically, and I've talked to Betsy Ann about the need to do this as well. So, Barbara.
So I got a question. So Sarah, if this is level funding a whole, it isn't level funding, given that costs have gone up, isn't really level funding, right? It's not level programming. And I just think that it's important to say that because that's what ends up happening to the people that are our community partners almost all the time. And I just feel like I hope our committee can make a statement about that on what we say to Ways and Means. And I don't know if you want to comment on that. I have one other idea that isn't for you. It's more, I guess, for our chair.
I would just say that I do think it's worth noting that since its establishment in 2008, I mean, this fund has essentially been level funded since 2008.
Yeah.
And so, for right now, given where we are in the fiscal year, given kind of how the center gets information about what the deficit will be in the fund, what we really need from the legislature is to address the current fiscal year deficit in the fund. If the legislature is able to do that, it will prevent cuts to over 20 organizations in communities across Vermont. And I also think that your point, Representative Rachelson, is very well taken, that, we need to have broader conversations about the way that we are funding victim services writ large and what that looks like. We are certainly not coming into the legislature asking for funding for multiple new positions or anything like that. All that we are asking for is to have the funds that have been provided to these 20 organizations since 2008 to continue to be provided at the same level for the next fiscal year.
My other comment is, I know that Vermont is a destination wedding locale, and I wonder if the fee that we charge Vermonters is the same as the fee that we charge out-of-staters. My son will not, but I think people from out of state should possibly, and I don't know, that's a Ways and Means thing, but I think it may be worth us inquiring, because again, that might be, and I hope that we look at sustainability and philosophy and methodology, but I realize that's not going to happen this fiscal year, and programs need to be planning, and they will need to make up the deficit, because I know for your community providers, the costs have gone up since 2008. I hope they're not paying their staff the same thing. Certainly health insurance is more, utilities are more. So it's unbelievable. It's frustrating that we as a government continue to give the scraps to the boots on the ground community partners. And it's like, I think we just have to say that over and over again until we treat our community partners with boards have to, you've got to balance your budgets, and it's putting more pressure on you all to come up with alternative funding. And again, we need to, as a committee, I think, keep that in mind, because otherwise it's going to be, oh, wow, we saved it this year. But this is what we've done the last few years. The Band-Aid comes off, we put a new Band-Aid on for a year. It comes off and we put a new Band-Aid on, and there's more pressure because we're putting nonprofits in further debt each year. and we rely on the incredible services that are provided. So maybe charging out-of-staters more would be an equitable way to, people pay a small fortune to do their weddings anyway, and out-of-staters maybe can pay $120. And
So I would suggest that we definitely put that, or you can definitely put that bug in the ear of the appropriations folks. I don't think we
Ways
would.
and Means?
Ways and Means, I meant.
Yeah.
Money committees, you know.
Yeah.
So any other questions for Sarah at this time? Not seeing any. I think we're going to go to Dan Dickerson first, and then we'll go to you, Jennifer, since we have Dan in from the JFO. If you could join us, that'd be great. So I'm assuming some of us would like to hear how this fits into the, in part, among other things, the JFO memo from last year, and also what kind of money impact this has, obviously, or anything else you want to share with us. And I'm sure we have questions.
Dan Dickerson from Joint Fiscal. I guess what I'm most prepared to speak about today is, this $15 that's part of the marriage license fee that goes to the general fund. What does that raise? And in FY22, that raised about $78,000. So it's not a ton of money. We're on track to raise about that amount in FY23. So my projection, in the issue brief that I put out last winter, I think I projected about 70,000 in FY22, but that was because the revenues were down so much in FY21. I just didn't know what they were going to bounce back to. As far as what I would project going forward, it'd probably be somewhere in the 75 to 80,000 range. So that's if you choose to dedicate those revenues to the domestic violence and domestic violence fund, it's probably going to be about that amount going into the fund that the general fund would use. So it's not a tremendous amount of money, but it's certainly one of the recommendations in the issue brief that I'm sure every little bit helps.
Right.
I'm sure that's what you're hearing.
Yeah, exactly. Where we are. So are there any questions for Dan? Not seeing any, but thank you for sharing that. Getting it from you is very important to understand what we're talking about. So
sure, and if you'd like any additional information, I can at the very least look it up and get back to you all. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. We'll go to Jennifer.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Jennifer Pullman. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Center for Crime Victim Services. And I want to thank the committee during these very busy times to make space for what for us is a really critical conversation, which is, supporting and making sure that the DVSB fund is a viable fund and that there are no cuts that need to happen. We're talking about keeping doors open, not about, again, as Sarah said, not about expanding any pieces, keeping doors open. I just want to acknowledge some of the conversation that I heard from the committee in that this process is really frustrating for us. And it's really disheartening because we feel like we're constantly trying to figure out how to do, it's like pieces of a puzzle in terms of how do we fund victim services. And so when we think about, again, this, what my friend Matt Valerio would call decimal dust, when we think about this decimal dust that can support this DVSB fund, that maybe $75,000 that we go in and ask for with respect to fees and fines, we don't feel good about it either. And we wish there were a place that we could be in where we were knowing what we had to provide to those who do the work, where we were able to carry out our charge as the Center for Crime Victim Services in terms of supporting the system of care for victims without wondering, how are we going to do this next year? Or maybe we can get an extra dollar here or there. So I just want to acknowledge that this for us is a really frustrating process as well. And so I acknowledge the questions that were coming and the discussion that was happening in terms of, where does the responsibility lie? For us right now, and to Representative Adriano's comment, we kind of went for those immediate low-hanging fruit where we already have that space in the fees and fine structure, rather than tackling the DMV. But I appreciate where you're going in terms of that conversation, and perhaps next year we'll be there. But for right now, we are just looking at keeping the doors open and trying to create an opportunity to kind of immediately stop the bleeding. This fund is pretty much in looking at a $300,000, maybe $350,000 deficit. It's funded through both the license fees and through fees and fines on traffic tickets and also criminal convictions. You all know, as I testified, that the special fund dollars that come from fees and fines are down about 47%. Those are not going to come back. The most stable way that we have to be able to support the DVSB fund is through marriage license fees. Those are not in a decline. Those are pretty predictable. And in terms of how we have to issue our grants, which we have to issue those basically by June. So the RFP process starts in the spring. That is the best way that we can kind of have some sort of solid numbers. We don't know about the special funds or federal funds until the fall in terms of how they're going to perform. So to support the DVSB fund through this, which as we're seeing it right now is not an increase, it's simply a shift. So we're not seeing this in this bill as proposed. We're not saying that there needs to be an increase. We're saying this is a shift. And it's an important shift that will make a huge difference. We're putting different puzzle pieces together, but this would be really important in terms of making sure that we don't have to make cuts come next fiscal year and keeping those doors open. And it's a building block and we're working on it, but it's really significant. So, you know, as Representative Rachelson had said, yes, it's another Band-Aid. So we take off the old one, we put on the new one, but we're just trying to get those Band-Aids out there to make sure that we're not looking at having to cut any positions. Absolutely have we been able to increase any funds to programs? No, there have been no increases. We've been
Jennifer, before you go on, Joe has a question. And,
I'm sorry. My eyes are not very good.
He can ask it now. He'll be a little closer to, I think, the point that he wants to make. So
yeah, I was just wondering. Thank you. So the 207. So if this was to pass and you get approximately $75,000 a year, there would still be a $275,000 deficit. So would that be made up with grants? Were you saying? I was just trying to clarify that.
We're working on a couple of different strategies, one of which is, and I did speak to this briefly when I did testify a couple of weeks ago on our budget, one of which is to shift the funding for the DV trainer that is with the Criminal Justice Training Council. That's about $61,000 comes from the DV fund for that. And then we are hoping that the surcharge language, which would shift that $725 from the surcharge, that $49 surcharge, it would shift that to the DVSB fund and to the Victims Compensation Fund. That would result in potentially $300,000 to be split, maybe $350,000. So we feel like with those puzzle pieces in place that we can carry this fund moving forward. We can't expand it, can't do anything different than we're doing, but we can avoid cuts.
Wonderful. And thank you for that, explaining that's helpful. And I just want to say again, I want to grow this fund, not level fund it. What you all do is so important. And you know, helping victims, that's something that needs to increase. And, you know, I would 100% support both option 2 and option 5 and whatever options would help your group, because, and all the groups doing this work, because it is sorely needed in this state. So thank you for all your work, and I hope we can find even more money for you.
I certainly really appreciate that, and perhaps during the off session we can have a conversation around option 5.
That'd be great.
Any more questions?
No, I'm good. I can always come up with more, but I'm good.
So I'm just going to put this out there. I am not fully tied to it, but I feel like it is worth just stating, because we've had the conversation of how are we going to make sure victim services are fully funded in the state. I don't want to stall this, but I'm like, is this a vehicle to put on that we want study committee, something to happen to look at this. I feel like,
That would put this in a whole different route. That would definitely have to go to appropriations. Right now, this probably does not. I was just talking to Betsy Ann about the path for this, and this would go to Ways and Means, not appropriations. And if we do that, it has another stop, and we only have 1 week. So we can look at, and we're going to take up victims services after a crossover, and we have the miscellaneous judiciary bill. If we want a study committee, we can consider it there, among other things. So
and one alternative to that too is giving the network some funding to come with a proposal to us, which may be both more efficient and cheaper than the study committee. And I'm sure they would involve, not the network, the Center for Crime Victim Services, could involve people, and was sort of in our ropes ask what could get talked on.
Right. Yeah, we can, talk.
I'd be happy to have us include it somewhere. I don't want to stall this, and I feel like we need to keep the conversation going.
Yes. Keep hope alive.
So I think those are the questions, but I did want, I think we can have a tie, frankly, to the municipal funds. And I don't think we have to bring people in to talk to us about this. I mean, municipalities are involved in law enforcement. I know this is a little stretch, but I think that it sends a signal, and Ways and Means are going to do what they're going to do anyway. So I would propose that we raise this to $65 and put $5 more to the municipal fund, just to move this along. I think that would be helpful. Karen.
So, I want this to move forward, so ultimately I'd be willing to go with what the majority wants, but I just have real concerns with it. I'd rather put, after all that we're hearing, if we're going to raise it, I'd rather put the $5 to this fund than to the municipal fund, where we don't even know if they need it or what it would go for. I feel like the piece that we have jurisdiction over is this fund, and I would just have a hard time with that.
As far as part of it going to the municipal fund, I texted my town clerk to ask her how long it's been at $10. And she said as long as she's been the town clerk, which is 15 years. And so it's been at least 15 years since that's been increased. And I fully support your proposal, Martin. I just think it's the right thing to do.
Well, if we want, all right, so I'll throw something else out there. If we want to be sending a message, definitely, this fee has not been raised since 2016. We suggest a $15 increase in the fee, $5 goes to the municipal fund, and extra $10 up, so it will go up to $60 goes to the Domestic and Sexual Violence Special Fund. We're sending a message. Ways and Means are going to accept the fact that we're saying we want money to get into this fund. So that's sending that message. I think hopefully addressing what you're concerned with here, that we're sending a strong message that this is about the victims fund, but we see some connection with the municipality. While we're on this marriage, yes, maybe it's not entirely in our jurisdiction, but I can make an argument that it is. And it frankly, in the end, doesn't really matter because it's mainly to get this to Ways and Means.
So in the spirit of doing our due diligence, raising I appreciate you asking your town clerk, but it feels like without us taking testimony, I don't know, town clerks have other sources of funding where I don't know what their budgets have been over the years compared to what, again, the main thrust of what this fund since 2008 has funded, and the limited access to other government funds that the people and the organizations that receive this funding receive. So I'm kind of with Karen, it feels like we are doing work that we didn't take testimony on, or get something from towns and the League of Towns and Cities, or so I appreciate what you're saying, Martin, but I probably I don't know, like, I feel uncomfortable.
Okay, fair enough. And Joe and then Ellen.
Just the $10 was 2007 for the town clerks. That's when it was enacted. It was raised from $8, and then the $8 was from 2001, and it goes from there.
Okay, all right, great. Thanks.
Yeah, I generally concur that with a couple of folks on the committee that we have not taken testimony and it's not our jurisdiction to be worrying about the municipal budgets, and nobody has raised that as an issue. In my town, which is a fairly large town for Vermont, there's about 5 to 15, maybe 20 marriages a year. So we're talking about $100 towards our town budgets. And then we're talking about maybe a lot more money to our cities where a lot more people live. And so there's more marriage licenses. And I really just don't think $100 for our town budgets is something that it's just, I really would like to stick to our jurisdiction on this. And personally, I'd really like to send the strongest message around we need to stop using fees for things like this. And this is an essential domestic and sexual violence services are essential services in Vermont, and they should be paid for by our general fund budget, not special fees that come and go. So if we're going to do some things with adding some money to increase this, I don't disagree with that. I could get on the board, but I'd like to really have a cover memo that states that this is not really our long-term solution here. We really need to look at a better long-term solution.
Right, and that, we can send that message again, and we've been sending that for 3 or 4 years at least, Barbara, I think, as far as that's concerned. So, okay. All right, well, we will, I'm sorry, Tom.
No, I was gonna say, I agree with Ella on how things are funded. I mean, to me, it's splitting hairs, when on one side, we do what we can not to fund with fees. And now on this side, we're increasing the funding with fees. And to me, it's like you can almost, throw this out and let's rewrite it, that it's all the money goes into the general fund and it's simply funded by the general fund. I mean, that's what we've been working toward for years, but yeah, I agree with that part 100%. But I know that's not gonna happen today.
It's not gonna, this is a short, this is a Band-Aid is what this is.
It is truly a Band-Aid.
But it's actually almost a yearly tourniquet, not a Band-Aid. I guess I want to rephrase my metaphor.
Yep, that's a better metaphor. Yeah. All right, so we're scheduled to vote tomorrow, but Sarah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say how much I am appreciating this conversation. And I know that this committee has for a long time been committed to moving these expenses into the general fund. And I would just emphasize what Jennifer Pullman said in that, we look forward to having that conversation with members of the committee, and we would be more than happy to work with you all on a bill, for next January that really makes a statement about moving these funds into the general fund and work on that conversation with your colleagues in appropriations as well. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you. All right, we will, unless there's any other comments, adjourn until 25 after.